I'm often asked whether TENS can be useful for Achilles tendonitis. So in this video, we're going to look at what the research shows. And we'll divide it between pain versus healing. And then we'll also look at best placement of electrodes as well as what settings you want to use. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from treatmyachilles.com, where you can get online physiotherapy assessment as well as treatment for any type of Achilles injuries, all done via video call. Have a look at the description of this video if you want a link to our website. So TENS can potentially help Achilles tendonitis in two ways. The first is that it may help reduce the pain, and perhaps it can even help healing. When we look at pain, there's actually quite a lot of research out there, and they've looked at different types of pain and different conditions, and it all seems to agree that it doesn't matter how long you've had your pain for, TENS could be useful to use in the moment. So it can relieve in the moment pain. While you're using the machine, your pain feels better. And it can perhaps improve your pain for a few hours after you've used it, but it doesn't seem to have a long-term effect. So simply using TENS day after day won't be enough to get rid of your Achilles pain. But it may be a helpful adjunct if you have a really painful Achilles and you don't want to be taking medications, or medication isn't working, because it often doesn't work for that. So it's something that I would consider as part of my treatment, but I wouldn't use it as a standalone treatment. I would combine it with other things we know that works. Now, I've made a whole video about what treatments can really work for Achilles tendonitis, and I'll put a link to that one in the description of this video. Now, when we look at research on healing, I was quite surprised at how few studies have actually investigated this. So I could only find 3 studies, and by the way, the links to those studies are all in the description of this video if you want to go look at them for yourself. The first was in 2005. A group of researchers wanted to see if they used TENS after Achilles tendon surgery, does it help the tendon to heal? So they took 18 patients who had surgery, 9 of them were in the control group, 9 of them in the treatment group that received the TENS, and they gave them TENS for, let me just see, how many days was that? 5 days, 30 minutes for 5 days in a row. And then they looked at what happened in the tendons. And this group of researchers actually reported that yes, the tendons that received the TENS looked as if they produced more collagen, and the density was, it was more dense, and it just looked as if it healed more quickly. The only problem is that this study actually had a high risk of bias when I looked at all the things that you rate a study's quality at. And if you want to know about that, I'll put a link to the blog article where I'll go into what I ranked it on in there if you want to look more into that. So what a high risk of bias means is that there were certain aspects of the study, how the researchers designed it, that may mean that their own personal opinions influence the outcome of the study. So it sounds positive, but we need more studies to prove it before we go, yes, this definitely works. So then the second study I could find was from 2015, and this group of researchers looked at rats, and they took 60 rats, 30 of them in the control group, 30 of them in the experimental group. And again, they injured the Achilles tendon and then looked at what happened if they gave one group TENS and the other group didn't get it. And in this study, they actually found that actually it inhibited the collagen growth, and the rats who got the TENS didn't recover as well as the ones that didn't get the TENS. But again, this study also had a high risk of bias, so we've got to be just a little bit careful of jumping to conclusions just from this study's results. So now we've got 2 studies that go against each other. Then the last study I could find was actually a recent one from 2021. And this was by a group of researchers, again on rats. Their study was a little bit different in that they didn't look at TENS that you put on the skin. So that's the typical TENS. They actually looked at if they stick needles into the Achilles tendon and delivered it that way, what would happen. They took 34 rats, so 17 in each group, and again they looked at how well it healed after they injured the tendon. And this group also showed that perhaps the collagen density was better and the collagen was stronger after they used the TENS for a couple of weeks. What I would say with this research is none of this, oh, by the way, this study was a medium risk of bias, so better than the previous 2, but there were still some concerns. So I guess my take home from this is that I'm not convinced that it helps for healing that much. We're going to need stronger studies and actual studies on humans to prove that it does. And from experience, I've not seen massive improvements in my patients who uses TENS versus the ones who don't, when it comes to healing times and things like that. But it may be useful for pain. So if you've got a really, really painful Achilles, or it's just really driving you nuts at times of the day, then it can be a useful thing to use. So let's have a look at how you would use it. Okay, so if we start with where do you actually put the pads? Now, the research on pain science shows that it doesn't really matter where you place it as long as the current crosses the painful area. So if we think of the Achilles tendon, if this is your painful area, you'd want to place it either one on top, one on the bottom, so the current runs like that, or going to place one on this side and one on that side so the current crosses it that way. That's why it can be useful if you get one of those TENS machines that also has really tiny pads that you can attach to it, because that will stick better on the tendon. Otherwise it may come off a little bit, I find, if the pads are too big. So I'll put a link in the description of this video if you want to see examples of the machines I could find that has pads like that. But those pads may even fit onto the machine that you've got already at home, so have a look. Now the second thing is, what about intensity? Again, they showed that actually there's no ideal intensity. What they found worked best for pain was if the person had it as high as they could tolerate without it being painful, because if you cause pain through it, it actually increases your pain. So you want it as high as you can tolerate without it actually being painful and without it eliciting a muscle contraction. So if you're using the TENS machine and you're getting a contraction, you've got to decrease the intensity, but otherwise you have it as high as you can tolerate, that it's still comfortable, but it's quite significant, the feeling you get. And then the only thing with this is that the body gets used to the signal. So it's kind of like background noise. You know, when there's a sound that's there the whole time, you hear it at the beginning and then later on it's like, oh, I don't even notice that anymore. Same thing happens with TENS input. So although you'll see that most TENS machines has lots of different settings, and some of them are modulated, that they go funny now and then like that, and then funny now and like that. And that's because of that getting used to the signal. So if you have it that it varies it, your body doesn't get used to it, so then it works better for pain. So see what setting on your TENS machine varies the intensity, and that will be the best one to use. How often can you use it? Well, the research shows it doesn't really matter. You can use it as long as you like. It's not one of those things that you can overdo. So use it as much as you feel you need it. The only thing is you can get irritation of your skin if you leave the pads on too long, and sometimes they can give you rashes if you're allergic to it. But as for serious side effects, the only thing you don't want to do is put it over something like a pacemaker or anything that's electrical that you've got planted into you, because the electrical current from the TENS may interfere with that. But if you're using it on the Achilles, that's very far away from where a pacemaker would be, so that should be okay. Brilliant. Hope you found that useful. Now remember, if you need more help with an injury, you're welcome to consult one of the team via video call. The link to the website is in the description of this video. Take care.